What's going on, everybody? It's Frito and Weagle back again for a meta discussion, this time with so many moving parts that I assumed that this was going to go a bit longer than some of the recent ones, but that's okay because that means there's plenty of stuff to break down and discuss. Season 6 is going to be going live today, and I want to sort of gear us in towards what I think we're going to be discovering with the meta of the game. We actually haven't had a ton of time to play the new patch, although it was on the PTR, most people don't play it. It just came out, and now Season 6 is live now, so we're jumping right in head first into Junkrat having two minds and Orisa being really good. Overall, though, I think that we can say that the mobility meta, on the whole, is on the decline. So if you want to dive comp to at least have answers, I think that's where we're going to be and where the main focal point of this discussion is going to be. Now, I don't think mobility is dead entirely, but it definitely has answers at every turn, whether that's Doomfist waiting for you around the corner, Junkrat is insane with two minds, I don't know how to stress that enough, really, really good, as well as Orisa. The first character that I'll hone in on is Junkrat, who I think a lot of people don't realize the power that he had in his current state, which is kind of an issue sometimes when we think a character is underrated, which I think we said months ago, that Junkrat has been underrated, quite underrated, especially against the dive comp in the dive meta back then in Season 5, but now he has one of the easier insta-kill abilities in the game, where if somebody runs up on him, he can very quickly throw two mines at it, on top of the fact that he already kind of could do that anyway, and he can use those two mines to get across the map and do a lot of crazy things, which just by him alone is going to shift the meta in a big way, but we also have a handful of other characters to talk about, so however you want to jump in on this, Liam, go ahead.
Well, I'll be playing a lot of Junkrat this season, that's for sure. I think that the potential he already had since his buff so that he takes no damage from his own explosives, that was so huge and underrated anyway. So you can barrel stuff someone and then throw a mine to just do like 200 something damage instantly. Well, now you can do that with two mines in a row. Not only that, if you ever find yourself out of position or you commit too much to a frag, then you also get a mine to get you out. I think the mobility part there is nearly as important as being able to get an insta-kill. Well, now if a Winston dives you, for example, and he ends up in your trap, you're just going to kill him every single time. If anything ends up in your trap and you've got a mine on it, it's going to die, and then you've already got an extra mine in your pocket ready for the next guy that gets in your face. So his DPS has just gone up by so much, but not just his raw DPS, it's more about his reliable DPS, because he's a spam character mostly. However, his mine is just so easy to hit now that you're guaranteed to get a kill with it if anyone gets anywhere near close to you. If a Tracer gets near to you, she's always going to take some damage from some off angle, one mine to the face. If that doesn't kill her, she's only a melee away from being dead. So I think just that alone for the mobility and the DPS reliability, he's just amazing. And the Junkrat tire now, it's so much faster. The 30% has made such a difference that you can run it up walls and send it across the map so easily. And when it's in the air, it makes way less noise as well. There's going to be a lot of really cheeky, over-the-wall map spots. I mean, there already were some, but now they're all going to be so much easier to pull off, making his ultimate fight that bit better as well. Coupled with how matchmaking is very poke at the choke for the most part at a lot of ranks, with the other changes that are coming too, and we'll go into Orisa in a second, I can see how Junkrat could be a pick on nearly every defense point for the whole season if nothing else changes, because D.Va can't eat it anymore, diving him's not as reliable, and Orisa, which I'm going to let Frito roll into now.
I want to go into a little bit more depth into Junkrat, because some cool things that you can do with him that I don't think people maybe know enough, because he's been so hard to play in the past. At least punishable, I think, is the point. Kind of like McCree in that way, where he's kind of a sitting duck if he doesn't hit his very crucial shots. Well, Junkrat can do on a Tracer, for instance, when he's hiding, holding an angle, just one connection on either his mine or his main projectile and a melee really quick can get an insta-kill on that. That's a combo you're going to want to learn. But also, pre-firing a grenade like around a corner or down a lane or bouncing it off a wall and then peeking into it with a mine can lead to some of the most devastating and quick kills that you can find as well. Not just the double mine to almost guarantee that you're safe against any squishy diving you. There's all those other tools available to him as well, now that he has the extra mine in his pocket, and the pace of him and the flow of him is really sick. So the characters that I think he's good against especially are characters that were more or less pretty strong anyway. Doomfist is quite strong. He's good against him. Really slow compositions like Orisa, which we'll go into in a sec, he's good against her, I think, because he can kind of bounce grenades into angles where it'll hit her team and they're going to be sitting in a defensible spot anyway, so he can spam from a distance in order to try to break that setup. But also, some surprising interactions is like how good I think he is against Genji. I think Genji is going to have some of the roughest time he's had in any meta against Junkrat, Mind Spam, as well as Doomfist around every corner. Quite difficult for Genji right now, on top of the fact that there's just slower, more tanky builds, I think, that are going to be more common. Moving on to Orisa, though, she was underrated as well, actually. I thought she was quite playable in a Torb setup especially, and they changed so many things about her in such a way that I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see triple tank come back, at least in some capacity, because her damage output, her raw DPS capability, as well as her ranged reliability, because the projectile's faster, right, is much higher, so that you probably could play Rein, Orisa, Zarya, and just keep charging up that Zarya and use her as your secondary DPS, and then probably a Doomfist as the main DPS, and you can build this really tanky, immobile comp that you can just like sit on a point, much like you might do on like Horizon Point A or other defenses that are similar. Orisa is quite strong right now as well, and her shielding is insane, and you're going to need the shielding because the Junkrat spam is coming as well, and I think that's where a lot of the main interplay is going to come. Orisa's strong against Doomfist, already stronger now. I didn't really suggest her as a big Doomfist counter in the past because a little bit too niche of a playstyle. Orisa was required to synergize with other picks for her to really be valuable, but now I think she's just another tank, another main tank where they wanted her to be for a long time, but perhaps even too good, I think.
Well, for me, you say Junkrat kind of counters Orisa, can bounce things off the wall and go around to blow her team up, but I think them coupled together on a defensive setup with a Torb. Can you imagine trying to go into Hanamura choke when there's an Orisa shield, and it's much bigger now, by the way. Massive shield takes up the whole choke, Torb turret in the back, Junkrat trap up top so no one can flank. It's going to be really tough. Even if they have like a Pharah Mercy combination, it's going to be really hard to get in there. And even Orisa now can at least get some damage off on the Pharah Mercy as well. You have an Ana and a Soldier on your team. I can see really strong defensive setups being even better than they've ever been. And the thing is, they're not necessarily always being good at all ranks, but I think now they're going to be even more applicable at more ranks because of how matchmaking plays, and simply speeding your team through the choke is getting more and more difficult to do. And with all of these threats of spam and barriers, could lead to a meta that I think people won't appreciate as much as they think they will as it currently goes. It does depend what happens to Mercy and D.Va as well, which we'll speak about a bit later. But Orisa's good now. She's just flat out good. She gets more shielding than Rein, I think, now, because she gets a new shield every 8 seconds with 1,000 health or so. And it's bigger than it ever was. She can shoot from behind it. It's just a good time for Orisa.
An important point about that is that a lot of players, I think, oftentimes see those type of really tanky setups, which have Orisa, Torb, or whatever type of stronghold that they have set up, and they want to run normal dive comp into it, but that's like a dive comp counter. Don't do that. I highly suggest that you instead look to either farm up like a Sombra ult, for instance. She's not good at harassing that comp necessarily because she can easily get picked off by something, but if she farms up ult at least, then you can EMP the whole setup and be good from there. But even more so, it just slows down the game in such a way where you're probably going to have to use an attack Hanzo or Pharmacy and using Mercy to damage amp things at range. Mercy already is good in this meta regardless of her rework, and I think maybe a little bit down the line in this conversation we'll talk about her rework if that is to go live. She's already good because she's good at that poke at the choke, range damage amping type setup, because anytime the game slows down, a lot of the fights get determined by ult wipes because the engagements are so slow, whereas in the dive meta, there was less emphasis on ult wiping because everyone's so spread out, the frags can happen and frag back even at any point, whereas the slower the meta gets, the more it's more about like a set engagement and ult combinations, and because of that, a res is going to be very good right now, because remember, currently on live, she can still res the whole team. So that's going to be quite powerful as well.
So I think we'll move on to Reinhardt, and there's two ways to look at this. I'm not sure if the fact that he can move his camera while the shielder is up in the game yet. I don't know if it's there. But I think he's just going to be a little bit better as the meta slows down. So he's good, again, with a Junkrat behind him, spamming through chokes. We're going to see more Reinhardt. But I think that the fact he can look behind him now does make a nice subtle difference in his applicability. I think the fact that you can just have a look around, keep your shield in the right place, and you can still move when you do it too. It's just a nice little subtle change to him in a meta again where he's going to be better than he was before. So I think Reinhardt is probably the most balanced hero in the game. He went so long with a few different changes, but they were never massive ones, and then all of a sudden he was useless. Well, that was because of the meta, and yet he hasn't changed, and now he's going to be good again. So I think he's really balanced. I think we're going to see more of him, which I like, because I like playing Reinhardt.
And then, speaking of main tanks, maybe we can compare to Winston, where he's going to be viable. I think it's going to be highly dependent on the way that the map structure is. So, for instance, if you ever can split the enemy team quite well, that's where Winston's going to look good. But the smaller and more choke-dependent and close range the fight gets, Ryan is just going to be much more playable than he ever was before, because he's got all the supporting cast that really plays around him.
Also, if current Mercy goes through, she can just res him instantly. So, just saying, that's going to be strong. So Roadhog has also had his changes going through, and I kind of glossed over it a little bit by accident in our patch review yesterday because I thought the Roadhog change for some reason was already out. So that is out now, can confirm, and I didn't mention it in that video. But Roadhog, we've been told by the devs, Scott Mercer, I believe it was, said on the forums, make sure you give Roadhog a chance because the new Roadhog is good because you can't kill him. So he may not be quite as good at hooking people and getting insta-kills, which I still vouch for is still fairly reliable. He's good at hooking people into the team, but now he is way more difficult to kill. So you do actually have to go out of your way to make sure you either burst him down with a team or hit a nice anti-nade on him or crowd control him when he does start to try and heal himself to, of course, cancel that ability because now he's just way harder to kill. It's just that simple. So does that make him meta? I'm not sure. I think that he's okay anyway, and now he's had this big buff in the health department. So I think people are hoping he's going to go back to being an insta-kill character. That's just a dream that I don't think we're ever going to see again. If anything, it's going to be more about hooking people into your team and being some kind of like an off-utility tank, like a new hybrid category of character that we haven't really had yet. But his insta-kill is not going to come back, but he is looking a lot better than he has before. In terms of what setups he'll be run on, I'm actually not sure. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Prior to these buffs, I would have ranked Roadhog quite similar to Junkrat, actually, where the utility of what he does can be great in specific maps. I think a big backlash towards the Roadhog nerfs was due to everyone trying to play him in his old playstyle rather than putting him in those situations where he's incredibly good. I almost would have made a video about this, but I just didn't have the opportunity to play Roadhog that much, not to mention it kind of tilts the team when you do nowadays. But like, for instance, on Li Jiang Control Center, you kind of meet at a head and there's this long lane where the fight starts. Well, if the enemy was running dive comp, there's going to be this wide open area to hit a hook. Anytime you can set up that type of engagement for Roadhog, he looked good prior to the buff. And I think now, if you're able to play in a more slow style, the problem with that is if there's too many barriers in the way, he can't find those hooks. He was actually better against the dive tanks. You might say the Winston Diva synergy could outplay him and kind of style on him a bit. That's definitely true. Definitely really strong. You had to use Roadhog Hook as more of like a surprise and very tactical decision in order to disrupt the imposing dive comp on you. Although, to some degree, he's okay sieging those slow setups because his shield break actually is good, remember that. However, the problem is I don't think shield break is going to be very easy anymore because Orisa's barrier is up so frequently. So, like, if the enemy defense is running a double barrier setup with Orisa and Rhine, you just aren't really ever breaking that, I think, unless you go into some sort of like max shield break comp with Junkrat, Hanzo, and Roadhog or something, which is really good at just spamming damage into that. Maybe that would work. I'm not exactly sure. But part of the problem really is that a character like Zarya probably is just better at that job entirely. So the utility of the hook is still there, but I don't know if we're in a meta where that matters too much.
Yeah, you don't usually see people in matchmaking yet be like, yeah, let's have a Ryan and an Orisa. Well, I think when people realize how good that's going to be, we're going to see more and more of it.
Like on King's Row, for instance.
Yeah, no one's pushing that, you know? If there's 2 shields up, it's harder for the Widow to get picks or a Hanzo. You've either got to go full shield break with Bastion, Junkrat or something, or you've got to get some real cheeky flanks and get some picks somehow with one of the pick-off heroes. And speaking of pick-off heroes, Widow has also received a buff, and I think it's a really good buff, so you can now see people round corners through walls if you hit them with your Venom Mine, and the hook shot is now 8 seconds instead of 12. This doesn't make much of a difference at all to a lower tier average Widowmaker. I just don't think it does. I think Widow is such a niche pick, and you rarely see super strong Widows. However, people that are really good at Widow and can hit them shots can move around more, get in better places more, stay alive easier, you know, because their hook comes back in 8 seconds, not 12. That 4 seconds is a big difference. So survivability makes a big difference, and also being able to just shoot your mine across the map, and then when they run away, seeing them through corners, when they repeak, it's a free kill for a good Widow. So a very high-end buff, in my opinion, and for the lower tier, probably doesn't make a huge difference. But one thing that I think people fail to realize a lot is some heroes are just going to be harder. It doesn't make them underpowered. It just makes you have to access that kit to get it out through using a lot of skill. And Widow's always going to be like that. That's never going to change. And I don't think that's a problem. I think it's fine. So Widow's good if you're good with Widow. I'm not, so I envy you if you are. But I think we'll see just as much Widow as we've seen before. And we shouldn't see more because she's not buffed enough, I don't think, to justify more picks.
I agree with all that. I would clarify that maybe a bit more at the higher end, but that's a nitpick. One problem that Widow has in the meta that we're going to be seeing is that her shield break is bad, but with an 8-second hook, can she get above that shield? Because if we get in like a poke at the choke style meta again, we've had this before, by the way. You may have forgotten with so long it being dive meta being the thing. If Widow can more frequently just keep taking cracks at that hook shot, you know, Hollywood hook shotting off of the big pine tree or whatever it is and going over the top, the more frequent she can do that, the more viable she looks. And eventually, no matter what, doesn't matter how tanky your setup is, if you're down a man, well, I guess you could res in the current thing. Maybe it's time we get to that. If you're down a man, you're going to have the disadvantage going into that fight, even if you have the best stronghold setup. So I'm excited about the Widow changes. We'll have to see how it pans out.
So we've got some notes here. Doomfist, Tracer, Genji. We've already mentioned Genji going to be weaker. I think Tracer, she's about the same. I think that maybe she'll be used slightly less depending on comps, but she's just really powerful. The mobility she has, the outplay value she has, I think that that's just not going to change ever. Doomfist has had his hitbox nerf. I believe that's gone through now. Doomfist is a controversial subject, so I will try to pick my words well. But I think he's definitely not as powerful as Tracer is. He's not as powerful as a lot of the different DPS are on certain maps. I think we're going to see Doomfist be one of the strongest hero in the games on some maps, like King's Row Second Point, for example. There's so many tight angles there. Doomfist is just going to destroy. But you watch the pro scene and it looks like Doomfist is wrecking 1 minute and then another team just take a McCree and a Junkrat and it's all going to be over for Doomfist as well. So with all of these other changes, that just instantly balances out Doomfist, I think, anyway. I don't even want to try and use him. It's really difficult to actually keep using to a degree that is not throwing, because he can look incredible when he's doing amazing, a little bit like Widow, although his kit is easier to access. However, if there's a good McCree on the other team and your team aren't initiating properly and all of this poking that the choking is doing, Doomfist does nothing at all. So I think the meta's going to work itself out and tell us where Doomfist should be. But I definitely don't think he's super strong, other than a few points.
The hope that you might have, and I feel like I've said this maybe in every meta discussion, but that the meta shifts more towards strategies on specific maps, where in the previous meta, everyone just ran more or less dive comp, unless you're South Korea playing on King's Row, more or less dive comp on every single map, even if it's a tight map, big map, doesn't matter. Whereas I think on maps where you know Doomfist is strong, you could pick up Bastion, Orisa, and he more or less can do nothing into that. He can't break into it, can't really siege it until he gets his ult. Even then, it doesn't even kill the Bastion, I think. These types of strategies will open up, but the tankier, slower ones, I think, will always win out. Right now, especially on the pro scene, we're seeing a lot of Doomfist like slid into dive comps, but now that we're seeing the emergence of Junkrat be used, remember, this is before any of these buffs came out. This is with just the Doomfist patch the pros have been playing on. We're seeing these other characters like Junkrat and McCree coming back, and I think that slower playstyle in general is just going to get a buff overall, meaning that characters like Bastion and Mei and Hanzo will start to look more playable in more situations, especially in those close quarter maps. And we brought up a character like Tracer. Liam is a staunch Tracer defender. He thinks he's one of the best characters in the game. There was metas where she was unplayable, I want everyone to remember. I think on those really close maps where she's going to struggle to split off her enemy, she'll look weaker, but definitely on like King of the Hill or anytime there's a open field for her to traverse and get a big flank, she's still going to be strong.
It's like how she's not as strong on Eichenwald last point because there's nowhere really for her to go.
Yeah, exactly. Those types of maps where it's a lane, more or less, the characters that are good in those scenarios are just way better now because they have fewer and fewer weaknesses over time with the buffs that have come through.
I feel like we need to say this in a video it's on its own and be like, maps define heroes, not necessarily the meta, and I think we're getting more and more towards a place where maps define the heroes that you pick, not necessarily their power, because people, I think, get worried they want to play their mains all the time, but certain maps, some heroes are just better. You see people say, you can play Torb on every map. Well, yes, you can, but there is a better pick, So I think we're moving more towards that, hopefully, in that direction. So we're going to move on to the big one now, the Mercy change. So, it's controversial, this one. So the Mercy change has gone through, and Frito has aired his opinion about it still being too strong. I want to actually explain why it's so good. I think people are misunderstanding a little bit what we say when we try to explain it. So when Mercy was good before, or just old Mercy, let's say, the best reses were the reses that just brought back one or two people. You could ask your team to all die on the point to get a fat res, but really, if you just res two people, which is what the best Mercies do, if you watch like EVA or one of the GM Mercies or even pros playing Mercy, they always resed one or two people. Now, she gets that at the start of the game. She can res one person, and she gets it every 30 seconds. So that value that she used to have, the biggest portion of that value, is still accessed at the very start of the game now. When she actually uses it and then pops her ultimate, she then gets another res, which is 2 reses, and she gets another 2 reses over the next 20 seconds. That's 4 reses within 21 seconds or something. It's crazy. And then actually, if you time it right, you can get out a 4th or a 5th res, making nearly 5 tempo reses within a 40-second period. So the thing that she was best at, that she would only get every minute at best, probably more like a minute and a half, she can now do multiple times within a team fight. So actually making her a mid-fight hero is what people want. And I agree, I think that's absolutely amazing. If you think about what I've just explained, how powerful that is, well, she can also fly at the speed of light in any direction she likes. She constantly heals, and she can damage boost her whole team or heal her whole team as long as they're close enough to each other. So with all of that explained, she's really strong. And if it goes through, even without the rest of the stuff, even if just the res goes through on its own, how many times do you end up carrying out a game in matchmaking because you got a pick? Because your team has stood at the choke and you can't get a kill. Well, when you do that now, trying to get that carry value, they get rezzed instantly, meaning you have to do it twice. So the poke at the choke meta, and now that we've just explained, Junkrat's better, Orisa's better, Reinhardt, Roadhog, all of this stuff's better, and now if you do get a kill through all of that, it gets rezzed instantly. Also, her ultimate still builds the same speed as well. She's going to be incredible in this current way, and I love the mid-fight stuff. I love the extra reses and keeping her in the battle and boosting her whole team. This could be like game-breaking if it doesn't go through close to somewhat balanced. And as it is at the minute, this whole infinite ammo, super strong Mercy thing, which is still strong, we're not even thinking about that. We're thinking about the best thing she could ever do, she can now do 5 times in a minute. And I think that is what's really scary.
Although I did say I think Widow looks somewhat good in this meta, a character like Widow has very small windows to even have access to a shot, much less hitting it. So if you do find those small little peeks and pokes and hit your shot, if it gets rezzed, it's pretty difficult to try to find a scenario where that's opens you up to being punished, because that style of pick is so hard to get anyway. Why even go for it if it can just get denied by the push of a button on a cooldown? A lot of times you'll be poking at the choke like that, you go up, get a pick, well, Mercy Res is down, right? Now it's on cooldown, so it's time to engage. But you can't really engage with characters that are meant to play for pickoffs. They're not built to engage. So how can you even pick that into the Mercy anyway, is kind of the point I'm trying to make. Like, the whole benefit of being able to play some of these pickoff heroes is that they get that pick that gets you man advantage. And sometimes even, as you might know, if you either play Widowmaker or you have Widowmakers on your team, even when they get picks, because they can't have point presence, they can still end up losing the fight anyway, because they might get a kill, but if your Widowmaker isn't good enough to hit another shot later in the fight, you might lose the fight anyway. You have a, quote, man advantage, but it's only a man advantage if that Widow can keep pressing that advantage and keep hitting shots subsequent to that, which is difficult to do.
For me, there's only really one absolute must-pick hero in the game in most maps, and that's Lucio. And that's because he enables the game in a really exciting way. I have actually no problems with heroes being must-picks or very meta, but I think what Mercy looks like it could go is she is a must pick. You have to have a Mercy on each team because you have to have that res for free when someone gets a pick. That's what scares me. This should definitely scare a lot of people that complain to us about Pharah Mercy, is how devastating that combo is going to be now, because how hard is it to kill Pharah Mercy when your team don't talk, they don't communicate? Also, D.Va's been nerfed, by the way. How on earth is Pharah Mercy ever going to die? Because Mercy can res the Pharah, or what if when Mercy has her ultimate and she can res her multiple times and damage boost her and be absolutely unkillable because she's flying around the map and regenerating her health at the same time? Pharah Mercy is going to be twice as strong as it ever was. And the amount of complaints I still see about old Pharah Mercy every single day is huge. So I don't even know what's going to happen there. I have no idea. I don't know if they're going to nerf Pharah or buff some other counter to Pharah. But D.Va was the strongest counter, and now she's been halved in that counter realm. And she can't fly up and kill Pharah and Mercy at the same time, no matter how good her rockets are and how good our shooting and tracking are. So I want mid-fight Mercy too. I promise you I do. I'm just really concerned about the way that this could go with her. Just being an absolute must pick, reses all the time, horrible poke at the choke meta. That's my only fear, because the game's been really fluid and a lot of heroes have been viable, and I think they still are. So let's hopefully not have Mercy as a one-shot res every 30 seconds must pick. That's the only thing that I don't want. Mid-fight Mercy, I'm all for though. I love the direction they're going with it. It's just gone a little bit too far as it currently is.
The argument against Pharah being the be-all, end-all, because back in the day, there was a meta where Pharah was the must-pick DPS, when the hit scans got nerfed basically to oblivion. That was the case. There's a couple things that are keeping Pharah in check, and luckily, I think, if you utilize the tools that are available in the game now, we can still see Pharah being somewhat weak. It's just going to be much different than how we utilized D.Va in the past. I think against most heroes, the D.Va rework, I might not air it on being an overall nerf, but it is in the case of what her strongest thing was. So it's a nerf if you used the Korean D.Va playstyle. That was definitely nerfed. But for players that weren't utilizing it, it's more or less going to be the same. The problem is, it used to be the case where there was a pharmacy committing 2 characters to be able to damage amp rockets that shot relatively slow, so that if you just ate those rockets, you would pace out the fight. You would tempo out the fight in a way where you were getting more value than the enemy because they're committing too much to do nothing, basically. Now you can't do that. Instead, I think what you're going to have to do is have a combination of either smart Orisa shield placement. Normally, Pharah's good against Reinhardt and Orisa's barriers because she can flank them, but Orisa's barrier's got like a big cone to it, so I think you could probably block off most of the area with Orisa and Reinhardt, meaning that it's going to be difficult for her to find an angle. On top of that, Orisa can hit Pharah now, quite reliably actually. D.Va can chase her down, not really that good, but you may have to have a Widow to take her out. Luckily that she has her hook shot on a lower cooldown, meaning that the mobility problem that Widow had against Pharah will be a bit better now. I don't know if that necessarily means Widow is more favored than she used to be. It still probably is an all-in, depending on either Widow hitting a shot in a small distance of time or Pharah hitting her rockets and pouncing her before she has time to react, because Widow is obviously weak to dive. So it's going to be a combination of these things. I think in order to break these really powerful tanky setups, you'll probably have to build these damage amp comps anyway, and Pharah could be a piece in that, and the mobility that she has to outmaneuver these tanky compositions is going to be really powerful regardless. And I agree with everything you said about the pharmacy combo being just simply better now, because it already was the case where pros would use their ultimate just to res Pharah. As soon as she dies, boom, resed her. But now you have that on cooldown and can do it again and again and again in the ultimate fight. So really, really strong.
We've pretty much covered D.Va, I think. There's just one thing I want to say, and that's that a lot of stuff in the game that sucks and you don't like to die to, D.Va did counter pretty hard. So Nano Visor is coming back, baby. Nano Visor is going to be really good. Any Nano combo that D.Va could initially block is just going to be better. I mean, like Roadhog's ult's better, McCree's ult's better as well. All of these ults are going to be way better because she just doesn't counter them anymore. So it's just the biggest meta shift ever.
The good news is we've played in slower metas before, so we kind of know what to expect, I think. There was metas where mobility was just too hard to utilize because Roadhog hook hitbox went through space and time in order to hook you around corners and stuff so that you couldn't even really move anywhere because you could instantly be punished. We're moving towards that slightly, but not in the hands of a single character, but just multiple characters being able to punish mobility in a way where you can construct comps that are quite strong against dive comp. Mobility is still strong when it can be used, but it's definitely going to be counterable with all the tools that you have at your disposal. For a lot of players, I think this is a good thing because the mobility meta's pace was a bit too frantic for them, and they might prefer the slower, methodical, building up for ult fights playstyle, which was kind of the norm back when Shield Break and Reinhardt was a big mainstay. Whenever that was the case, teamfights just had a slower pace to them, and it was pretty hard to get pickoffs because there was always a shield in the way. In the mobility meta, well, some pro teams can just slap on Widowmaker and there's only so much defense matrixing you can do. Like, you can't protect these angles and frags can happen everywhere across the board, and it was really hectic to watch and to play. So there's other characters that we haven't even had a chance to even talk about that I think are good as well. May we might throw in there, but we've said so much.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Let us know what you guys think in the comments section down below. I'd really like to read through on what your opinions are on how it will go, and if you agree with us, do you like that it's going in that direction? Because I just want to see, as we explained before, heroes viable on different maps. So Deathball might be amazing on King's Row, but when you play Route 66 on attack, dive comp's better. So that's what I want to see. Let us know what you guys think. Be sure to follow our Twitter, hit that bell icon so you guys get notified when our videos go live and all that good stuff, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
That's usually my thing.